doing a topic tonight on uncovering your purpose. We are joined by Samantha Feynman and myself from New Frontiers, but more importantly, it's Claire Sellers joining us from Mix. It's a fascinating organization. You should check it out. They actually do a quick plug. They are open enrollment now, looking into the fall semester. So if you want to check them out and any specific questions, Claire would be happy to take them in the survey and follow up in an email afterwards. But today we're really going to be exploring this concept of uncovering your purpose. It ties into so many different areas, really with education, with informing what your next moves are, gap years, all of this ties into not only the decision that a lot of high schoolers are facing, but really any individuals. Like, this isn't just for one specific group. So a lot of the topics and concepts we'll be talking about are really applicable across the ages. But just to get an idea of who's here, I'm launching a quick poll just to understand the makeup of the audience. So if you don't mind just filling that out briefly, and then we'll jump right into it. Okay, give them 30 more seconds. So it looks like majority professionals. So we got 83%, and then we have a couple of parents of middle school students, which is great. That's like such a great age. And then parent of other. Great. All right. So predominantly professionals, but then we also have some parents of middle schoolers and then parents of beyond. So really, just to start off this conversation, Claire, can you just what is purpose? Like, you guys use purpose a lot at Mix, and how do you guys define it?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. And, purpose is a word that, especially recently, has been thrown around a lot. And it's becoming quite common to hear, what is your purpose? Or I'm trying to find my purpose, or I don't know what my purpose is. And so at Mix, what we are doing is really revolutionizing the idea of purpose by rewriting the narrative that you are your purpose. So your purpose is not a job, it's not a title, it's not, your college major. It's not, the fact that you were the lead in the school plays. It's not your high school superlative. It's not the thing that you excel at in middle school. Like, that is not your purpose. You and who you are at your core is your purpose. And so our work as human beings in this life is to really get clear on who we are by, moving away from the things that distract us from actually creating the life that we want. And then the byproduct of that is when you really know who you are, when you have such a clear understanding of what your values are and what really matters to you, the byproduct of that is that you only engage in work and activities and relationships and life, that really is in alignment with who you are. And so it's almost like an inside out approach to fulfillment. And versus outside in, which is what we see so often and which often leads to the quarter life or midlife crisis.
And so we often, why search for this? So just for some people that might be listening, that's kind of, I don't know, it's just a feel good thing. But what are the benefits of that? It sounds good, but is it just that it sounds good? Is it just something you read on a card or one of those memes, find your purpose? Or what are the real benefits of exploring this topic?
Well, I think that the benefit here is to take the pressure off of young people, young adults of finding anything outside of themselves. Because I know that I've seen this with students in Mix, I've seen this with my coaching clients, they come to me and they say, I'm just trying to find my purpose, as if it's this thing they're going to kind of land on. And it's okay, I found it, I'm happy. And it just simply doesn't work like that, unfortunately. But what happens is that we have people out there, you know, applying to different jobs, getting different, you know, majors, going back to school, getting different certifications, you know, getting married, getting divorced, all in search of their purpose, seeking outside of themselves. And what the real process is going inward, getting more clarity on who you are, what you want, what are your values, what's important to you, what's your vision for the life that you want to create. And from there, then actually engaging in work, studies, relationships, careers that light you up from the inside out. And so I think that's why this is an important conversation, because we're flipping the narrative on, you know, your purpose is not outside of you, it's within you. And that takes a lot of pressure off, because we have people out there, you know, desperately seeking this sense of purpose when they don't need to seek it, it's in them. We just have to prepare and equip people with the tools to uncover it.
And then, so Sam, with the different, and this is really through the lifespan, like when working with different clients, different age groups, like, have you seen those kind of aha moments where it's less about having to do something, less about an expectation, more about, like, I guess what I'm getting at is do you see a tie to motivation there and impacting of other executive functions when this concept of purpose is found in clients that you've worked with?
Yeah, I definitely, and I think you know, I think that it changes over time, right? You know, if you think about, like, you know, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a dancer, I want to be a Major League Baseball player, right? And so lots of times young children kind of come to the table with a sense of, you know, what their purpose is, right? With their perspective on what life is at that moment. And then I think that as, you know, we see clients go kind of through the lifespan, they start to balance, you know, what their dreams and desires are with who they are, and, you know, find that the balance between those things. And yeah, I think it's very much tied to motivation. And motivation is kind of what drives us to, you know, setting and achieving our goals. And, you know, one is not going to be motivated unless they understand or feel that what they're driving themselves towards is not only meaningful externally, but also internally to themselves.
And so this, Claire, you mentioned before about like teaching the tools to them. Do you mind just giving like some examples of some of these tools that, and what role, and since we have a lot of professionals, like some of it may be tools, some of it is like permission to think a certain way, but what are things that professionals and parents can do to support this process, or skills to build to try and encourage this process?
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, just to, before I go into that, Sam, I love what you said about changing your mind. Because I think that there's I think one of the biggest issues that I see with people is that they feel stuck. You know, it's like, my parents are lawyers, and so, you know, I want to be a lawyer, and so that's the only thing I can do, or that's the only option out there. And then they end up in law school, and they know they're going to be miserable, but they do it anyway because they don't want to let their parents down. And then they end up at a law firm, and they're just miserable. And, you know, you can play that out in many different career paths and many different scenarios. And so I think, you know, that one of the things that we are imparting on young people is really the confidence and the courage and the curiosity to actually say, like, okay, I was interested in, you know, neuroscience, and I actually explored it, and it actually is really boring to me. And letting that be okay, you know, and letting that be part of your path and part of your process. You know, the exploration phase is one of the greatest gifts that we can give ourselves, you know, to be able to kind of say, like, hey, I'm curious about, political science, or I'm curious about theater, or I'm curious about filmmaking. Go do that. Go talk to somebody who's actually engaged in that, or who's, excelling at that. Ask them, like, what's it like to be a filmmaker? I have no clue, but for some reason, something in me is excited by that. And allowing that to kind of be part of your process versus feeling like, okay, I was really good at theater in high school, and so like I'm going to go study theater in New York, and that's the only thing I'm ever allowed to do. And so that's what we're really trying to prevent, is kind of that feeling of stuckness, which is, one of the reasons that coaching is so fantastic, is it helps people kind of get unstuck. So I just wanted to touch on that, but I think the permission to change is huge. Change your mind. And yeah, in terms of tools, there's so many in it, and it really depends on the person. But I think the foundational tools that we use are really rooted in what we call core values. And core values are essentially your essence, kind of what makes you you, like what is most important to you. So that could be something like freedom, or authenticity, or genuine connection, or service, or even adventure could be a core value. And so we identify core values. That's one of kind of the first steps. And the core values serve as kind of guideposts for you. And so if you're ever feeling stuck, or you're feeling unclear, you're feeling confused or lost, oftentimes it's because your core values are out of alignment. And so it just gives us a way to kind of do a little check, like, okay, what am I not honoring that's really important to me right now? And that usually, the core values are usually connected to what we call your sense of purpose. And so your sense of purpose, again, is ever evolving. My sense of purpose 3 years ago is different from what it is today. It's connected. There's change and evolution that, I've allowed to take place as kind of my passions have grown and my interests have developed. And so, by identifying your sense of purpose, which is essentially a statement that we come up with, so you're able to say, my sense of purpose is to ignite the light in others, or my sense of purpose is to, lead people to create change in organizations, or something like that. And so your, sense of purpose is ever evolving. It might not have anything to do with work. It might have something to do with work. It just depends. And so when we identify the core values and your sense of purpose, those are kind of like the two foundational tools that we teach and we use to help people get more clarity around, what it is that lights them up and what they want to actually create in the world.
And I think this is like, it just totally, that whole core values thing, I've never thought about it this way. And Sam, I wanted to see, I like to put you on the spot with random thoughts that come into my head. But when, let's say, work tied to your purpose as a core value, how is that useful to actually align that? So I work in this job because it promotes justice, and part of my purpose is bringing justice to the world. Like, what does that actual, almost more concrete connection of why I'm doing something, how does that play in, and why is that kind of an overlooked step? Like, how important is making that a real connection to help motivate someone to be enjoying what they're doing and do it well?
I mean, I think from a very pragmatic level, you spend a really large amount of your life working. So, right, you should be doing something that is motivating you and that you're enjoying doing. But I think that, from a deeper level, I think sometimes we forget that what we love isn't necessarily what we're good at. And so, it's really important when you're looking into a career or looking to do something for your life, that there's a balance of both of those things, that you are doing something that you love, but you're also doing something that you're good at. Because if you have only one of those two things, there's going to be a piece that's missing, right? If you're doing something you love, but you're not good at it, you might not have the opportunity to do it very long. And then all of a sudden, you know, you're not working, you're not employed in that job anymore, and then you're feeling like a failure. If you're doing something that you don't love, but you're really good at, you might be missing that piece of motivation. Just because you're good at something doesn't mean you're enjoying doing it. So I think it's important, because we don't necessarily align those two things together and see that they're equally important when it comes to making very big decisions, which are things like choosing your career path. Again, it's something that you're dedicating, you know, career is something you're dedicating a large amount of your life and your time and your energy to. And so you really want to make sure it's something that you love and something that you can do efficiently.
So I just want to reiterate, anyone else that wants to ask questions, some people already have been, but just anyone else, use the questions dialog box. And I'm throwing in some random notes when I can into the chat box if anyone wants to follow along there.
And Casey, there was a question I think that Claire was referencing with tools, right? Specific tools, and just to follow up with that, you know, that concept of what you love and what you're good at, it's actually it's a concept that several of the coaches that work for us have actually brought to the table in various different ways that we've gotten together. And it's, you know, a concept called ikigai, which is a Japanese concept that just refers to having a direction or sense of purpose in your life. And so part of that concept is not only what are you good at and what do you love, but what does the world need and what you can be paid for. So, you know, that's another really good tool to help people to start to visualize how to lay out, you know, how to find their purpose and what are the different attributes that go into really finding, you know, something that will help you make a long-term decision.
And the one other thing, just to throw out some concrete examples that we sometimes take for granted. This is the purpose of internships. It's to expose you to an environment, but it's not just getting the best internship. And so one tool is making sure an internship is used as a reflective experience. And well, I have a question written down for later about kind of metacognition and other tools to use in environments like that. But it's not just doing things. There's more to it. But internships, volunteer opportunities, research, Claire mentioned like informational interviews. These are all the types of tools of taking something that's abstract, your purpose, and trying to make it more concrete through action. Claire, I wanted to just tie back, and some of what Sam said was there has to be a balance. Like we can't just like, what would you say to that kid that has to work to make some money, to have his own spending money? Are you going to find your purpose everywhere? Is that a realistic expectation? Is everyone privileged enough to have that opportunity? And does it have to be an all or nothing? Like, does it have to be that every waking moment I'm living to my purpose and I'm the happiest person in the world? I think you generally know what I'm getting at. Like, what? Yeah. Where is the balance that you can find?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And, you know, it certainly is a privilege, you know, in many ways. And there's a lot in that. And I think, you know, the thing is that I think having a sense of purpose is something, it's kind of like your North Star. So you might be, you know, in a job that you don't necessarily love, but it's going to make it a lot easier to maybe you're, you know, seeking additional responsibilities within that job that feel more alignment with your purpose. You know, maybe you're doing something, you know, you're volunteering outside of your job or outside of your school because your job, you know, the money that you need to make right now, you know, doesn't allow you to kind of necessarily be truly fulfilling your purpose. However, you can create space outside of your job to do something that really lights you up. And, you know, I have clients and I've seen, you know, young people who they're so passionate about something and they don't want it to be their work. You know, for example, like glass making. It's something that's a random example, but it's a real life example I have with a client. And, you know, that is just their greatest passion, and they don't want it to be their career. And so they have, you know, a finance job, and they have created a type of schedule where they're able to go home and do glass making every single night. And it's so fulfilling for them. And maybe one day when they retire, you know, that can become, you know, a more, you know, permanent hobby, or, you know, even a small business. But I think having a sense of purpose, it's not like you arrive and you're like, I'm living it, I'm here, I'm doing it. It's the North Star that guides you in the decisions that you make, in the types of jobs that you seek, in the opportunities within those jobs, in the relationships that you have, etc. So really thinking of it as a North Star, as something to kind of guide you and guide your decisions versus kind of an arrival point or a destination.
And so we just got a fascinating question, and I want to toss this back to you or Sam, Claire. So Claire or Sam. So this is about a parent who has been out of the workforce for 5+ years to be at home with the kids, and they don't want to go back to doing what they were doing before. And so, like, is that too late? Is it too late to be looking for your purpose then? And I guess, how could you support someone like this that is, like, as you said, Claire, you want to avoid that midlife crisis, but what if you're having it? And like, so either Claire or Sam, Claire, why don't you jump in with a little bit first, and then Sam, if you have anything to throw in.
Yeah, I love this question. And, you know, it's never, ever too late, ever. You know, and I think that the best place to start is right here, right now. And so, you know, I think one thing, you know, I don't know the particular situation, but another tool that can be really helpful for anybody who's in a place where they're like, I know what I don't want. You know I don't want to work, you know, a 9 to 5, or, you know, I know I don't want to work in law, or, you know, I don't want to work in retail. I don't want to work weekends. So making a list of, like, what do you know you don't want? Like, let's just get that on the table. And then what is the exact opposite of that? You know, so I don't want to work on weekends. You know, I want to have weekends free to spend time with my family. Okay, that's a big chunk of information we've just established. Or I don't want to work in law. You know, I want to work in what's the opposite of that would feel exciting to you. So kind of taking what you don't know and then identifying, okay, what's the opposite of that actually would be exciting. And so what you end up with is, like, you know, it might be 3 things long to start with, but what you end up with is a list of things that you actually really do want. And so from there, you can say, you know, okay, like, I want to be at home with my kids. I don't want to work on the weekends. I want to work for myself. And, you know, I want to work in a creative field. Well, that's like an amazing place to start. And so that's how we turn the chaos and the confusion into clarity. That's one tool that can be really helpful. And, you know, it's never, ever too late. It's never too late.
I love that. People think of negative things more than they do positive things.
Yeah, but we can leverage that.
That's the tool part. It's like you can get that out easier from people.
Yeah.
And so now doing the opposite, you're getting closer. I love that. That's great. Sam, any advice that you would give over for someone that might be having that, like, just that career shift, but they've been out of the workforce anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to, you know, identify kind of, you know, from an executive functioning point of view, what is your goal, right? Is it is it going to be, you know, a long game, or is it going to be, I can't get away a webinar without him making an appearance? Is it going to be a long game, or is it a short game? Is it, you know, is it going to require you getting extra education? But starting, you know, with, like, you know, back to the basics again. What do you love, and what are you good at? What do you need? What do you need to do those things to be prepared to be employed in those areas, again, whether it's school or experience or volunteer work or, and sometimes I think, what can get frustrating is what you want and what you're ready for might be two different things, right? So kind of looking at it as a short-term plan and a long-term plan can help with motivation. The short-term plan is to put yourself back out there. And it may not be doing something exactly what you want to do right now, but getting yourself back into it, getting into the routine, building skills, building back your resume, and then the long-term plan of, settling in somewhere where you really feel that you found your purpose. And so I think sometimes where we start might not be exactly where we want to end, but it's just the fact that you're starting and you're making small steps towards that end goal and towards that purpose, which is really, really important. So, really just looking at it as kind of a long-term plan and seeing all of the different steps you need to take in order to get there.
And I would just throw in like two very concrete things. Define what the goal is. Is the goal financial? Do you need to make a certain amount of money because the kid no longer childcare? Do you need to bring money in? Is it that you want to get out of the house? Like you just want more structure? You want something outside of family? You want something for yourself? Like what is the utility of getting the job? It shouldn't just be to get a job. It's serving some function. And so really you need to first define what is the goal, like what are we working towards, and then seeing, is this a vehicle to help fulfill my purpose, to help give me a fulfillment, or is that outside? Like all of this really goes back to what is the problem trying to be solved, or what is the goal of it, and then you can start answering some of these other questions, like maybe you thought your purpose was your kids, but now you're realizing you want something else. And so a lot of this other self-discovery of purpose and all of that stuff, I think would then tie in much more. But if it's just you need to bring in money and you don't want to do what you were doing before, then that would look very different at that point, that functionality. So what, Claire, just what, when working with people, so a lot of what you were talking, I like how you highlighted that Sam said it's okay to change. And there's been this kind of culture of failure. And part of it, like I'll tie in some cognitive flexibility, but really it's like when you're a kindergartner, like school is chosen for you, you go to where you're told to go to, you go to the class that you're assigned to, you show up, you go to the next grade, you're told what math you're in, you're told what reading to do. Maybe in middle school you have one or two electives. That's been changing a little bit, which is, I will say, it was like one elective. Now they have a lot more, which is great. But you get what I'm saying. Life is scripted. Like college isn't really a choice. It's like, what do I do junior year? I take my exams and then I see what college I can go to. And this really leads to a lot of inflexibility. People are used to knowing what comes next. So what can we start doing as professionals or parents at whatever age to combat that a little bit? And I guess I'm being presumptuous here, but that's really important for helping you find your purpose, right? That goes against it a little bit, right?
Yeah, no, I think there is such a cultural, it's kind of like an anti-failure culture that has been created. It's like failure is the ultimate fear for so many. If you ask somebody, what's your biggest fear? 50% of the time it's going to be that I'm going to fail. And then you say, okay, and then what? And that's when you start to get underneath it, because failure is kind of like the blanket thing that it's like, that's the worst case scenario, but what's really the worst case scenario? And I think that, one of the things that we're trying to do at Mix is to normalize getting off the machine, because as you said, literally starting from kindergarten, it's like, okay, you're going to go through these grades, and then, you're going to go to high school, and then, you're going to do these certain things in high school that are considered, the right way, take the AP classes, be on student council, whatever it might be. And then it's time to go to four-year college. And that doesn't have to be the only way. That's not the best fit for a lot of people. And so, that's one of our focuses, is to really create a culture of choice and, choice as a pathway in higher education, because it just doesn't exist right now. And I think that, one of the anecdotes for failure is really choice, giving yourself permission to choose, to say, like, do I want to go to four-year college, or do I want to take a year? Or do I want to change majors sophomore year because I'm just unhappy? Or do I need to take a break? Or do I want to join the workforce right away? Or do I want to change my job? So giving yourself permission to choose, and I think normalizing that culturally, is really important.
I think it also, sometimes gap years get such a bad name, but it's when there isn't a goal associated. Like, oh, I'm just going to take a vacation.
Right.
And so I do love, like, that of the work that you guys do. Like, this time you're working towards some purpose.
Right.
And you're doing structured things to actually try and uncover that. But Sam, I just wanted to tie in a little bit about, like, getting in the way of finding purpose is, as I was talking about this fear of failure, these expectations, choices being made for youth when they're young, so they're not comfortable with making a wrong choice. But how could some of the individuals here encourage, like, so I want to tie in growth mindset. Like, that is such a key piece that we're seeing is missing with so many individuals. So how do you see growth mindset being really connected to this journey of uncovering your purpose?
Well, I think that I think that if you go back to that concept of a fear of failure, I think that a lot of times people feel failure because they don't recognize that it can lead to change, and that change can actually happen, right? So many times children think that they are finite, that I am what I am and I can't change that. And that's that fixed mindset of, right, like, it is going to be whatever it is, and I can't make it different. I can't change for the better. And so that fear of failure is because when the failure occurs, it's perceived as, this is proof that I can't do it, instead of understanding that failure actually teaches us what to do versus not to do, and that it's a learning experience. And so we just have to help shift that mindset that failure is not bad. It provides us with information to understand how we need to do things differently. So shifting that mindset from I can't do it to this is telling me I have to do it differently is important. That's how you get from that fixed mindset to growth mindset. That's how you get from I am just what I am and I'm not going to be able to do well, and so I'm not even going to bother to try, because if I fail, that just proves I can't. And instead, well, let me try it. Let me see what happens. If I don't do well the first time, all right, then I know I have to reflect and see how I can do better. And so, people can, parents can really help by helping them to understand what the purpose in failure is, which is just to provide information and checks and balances of what's working and what's not working in your environment.
So I see it so often, and Claire, I'd love to just take your take on it. Like the students that are in college, they were good at math in high school, so they went into a math major. They're not good at math anymore, and their world, it's like their world fell out beneath them. And So like, I guess what I wanted to ask you is that because he like had a false purpose? He made his purpose, I'm good at math? Or is that like an adaptability issue? Like, I guess like how do you balance wanting to encourage a student that he identifies as he's good at this and he likes this, or he thinks he likes this, to now that starts getting challenged, and he's not feeling that way anymore? How do you guide someone that's going through that realization in that exploration?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We see that a lot, and I actually personally experienced, a very similar situation. And I think that what happens with young people is that it's not the thing, it's not the subject or the activity or the hobby that they love. It's oftentimes the external validation that they're receiving that they're good at it, the praise, whether that's through test scores, through, parents saying good job, through, always getting the lead or always being the captain. Like, as humans, we want to do good. We want to succeed. We want to excel. And so when that message is being reinforced by the adults in your life or by your peers, well, yeah, you're like, hey, like everyone around me is saying, I'm amazing at this, so I better keep going because like that feels really good. That's human nature to feel like that and to want that. And then we want more of that. And so then what happens is we get to college and we're in a pool with all the people who were being told they were amazing at that thing. And all of a sudden, some of that external validation is removed. You don't have, mom and dad right next to you saying, like, keep going, your professor isn't doting on you, you have maybe fewer friends or different friends. And so I like to think of it, as we like to think of it as an exploration. So, and this is why coaching is so critical at this age, because what happens is that students get to college, they freak out because they realize, oh my God, I'm not good at this, or oh my God, I don't like this, and now I'm stuck, and then they shut down, and a lot of times they just stay stuck. Whereas what we can do, as Sam was saying, is say like, okay, this is interesting. I thought I really liked math, and now that I'm actually doing it, I find it so boring. And so let me just pull apart what is it about math that I do like? What is it that I don't like? And how could I go a little bit deeper into the parts of it that I do like? Or what is something else totally different that I'm curious about? Can I go follow that? Can I give myself to change my mind and follow that? And so I think that, thinking of any type of change or failure or rejection as really a redirection. It's so much about perspective, but really reframing that as a redirection, and thinking of it as a gift. Like, hey, I got here, I made a choice, and I feel like I'm being sent in another direction. So I'm going to give myself permission to go on over there and check that out, and then I'm going to see how that feels. And that's the resilience that we really want to cultivate in young people, is the ability to say, like, I tried it and I don't think it's for me, so what's next? And keep it light. It doesn't have to be so heavy.
And so, I got to give you another doozy, Sam. So for parents and professionals helping with this, a lot of what we're talking about is mindsets and like how we think about things. Even just when Claire was talking about like, how do you feel when you're doing math? That's not an easy question for people to answer. So I just love if you could just connect a little bit about like metacognition, meta-emotional, like the language skills. So when talking with someone, like self-monitoring, I guess is what I'm getting at. How important is to teach someone to connect, I'm doing this and it makes me feel? Because I think about this student that went in, just like Claire said, it probably 100% was his dad, his mom, his teachers all told him he was good at math. He wasn't doing math for himself. It was for those external rewards. but it would take a long time for someone to build up those skills to realize that. So how can we start teaching some self-monitoring and those connections of how we feel? How can we start teaching younger people or even older people that skill? Because I think that is such a key part here.
Well, I mean, to address your first part of the question, like why, there's the brain-body connection, right? So we have a physical response based on how we feel, and sometimes we don't necessarily make that connection. So when we're doing something that we like, it makes us feel good. And when we have to do things that we don't like, it doesn't make us feel good. And so I think that, especially what we see with some of our clients is that when they're under a lot of stress academically or with, there's demands put on them that they don't necessarily see value in, then they have a physical reaction to that they're not necessarily connecting to the action itself. So Casey, how many times have we had clients who are overloaded, right, with academics and finals and midterms and response, just overscheduled, and they don't feel well. I have a stomach ache. I'm sick. I can't meet today. I'm tired. I just want to go to bed. I just want to sleep. And so, they're not necessarily making that connection between feeling overwhelmed and overscheduled and under a lot of stress and the physical reaction that their body is providing in response to that. So with that being said, things like metacognition and self-monitoring can help to externalize those internal connections, right? So making those connections between doing things that are difficult and how they make you feel. Is there an alternative way that we can do this so that you don't become as overwhelmed as you are right now? And when you do it in that alternate fashion, how do you feel differently? And so making those connections is incredibly important because it externalizes an internal process that isn't necessarily connected because it's internal. And then it develops that ability to self-monitor future representations of those examples. And so it's really important, to try and externalize those processes that happen that you're not quite sure is going on. We don't know, we can't get inside other people's heads, right? Unless we help them to externalize how they're feeling and tell us what's going on.
I think about that kid that anytime he has to write an essay, like pulling teeth, hates it, not motivating, and then gets that one opportunity and the support to do it, because oftentimes this requires cognitive flexibility, but creates an essay or research question of something that interests them. And then that essay is the easiest thing in the world to write. Helping those individuals, and that's one of the examples why I wanted to bring up that self-monitoring bit, is them knowing that when it's a topic that they enjoy, that resonates with their purpose, that resonates with something that motivates them, it's easier. And that's useful for them to know when it comes down to choosing classes, choosing majors, choosing jobs. Learning that sooner is so important, because think about when people are in a workforce, really look to the future and why this isn't just about choosing a college major. But I know I've seen people shift their jobs within the same company from one type of role to another, and their efficiency drops. And if they don't realize that maybe it's because their work isn't aligning, it's impacting. So that's why really that piece is so important. So Claire, I wanted to pull you in, if anything from there you wanted to add to, if any of that rang a bell with you.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. And I think, I love that you brought up, the felt sense in the body, because I think that's something that, isn't taught. And again, why I think coaching is so important, because people aren't taught how to feel sensations in their body. That's just kind of something that is skipped over. And I think, one of the tools that we use at Mix is helping students learn to identify and monitor their limiting beliefs. So we actually personify their limiting beliefs as a character to help them almost pull them apart from who they are. So that, when they have this voice in their head that's saying, like, you're a failure, don't try it, like, no one's gonna like you, they're able to kind of become the observer and say, like, that actually isn't true. That's just not true. And then on the other side, equipping them with another tool called the leader within. So helping them have a direct connection point to the wisest, most confident, all-knowing part of themselves through another characterization, so that they're able to go into that essay or go into that test, and they're able to tune into the part of themselves that is confident, that can nail it, that can answer the question perfectly, or, that can make a friend at a party where they don't know anyone. And so I think those are two really critical tools that really are the foundation of our mindset and mindfulness practices that we found are just so transformative.
And so, Sam, I think this is a great question to throw to you from the audience. For tweens who have difficulty identifying or naming feelings and externalizing them, do you have any key words or methods that might help, like using flashcards, using a scale of 1 to 10, any tidbits just to kind of help build that emotional vocabulary to lay the foundation for self-monitoring?
Are you giving me the layup to talk about my children? Is that what this is?
I was leaving it up to you if you wanted to bring them in this time.
Tweens are difficult. I have one myself. Actually, she's now officially a 13-year-old teenager, and they're very difficult. Overnight, they go from caring about what you think to not wanting anything to do with you. And the reality of the situation is it's developmental, right? They're trying, the tween teenager years in terms of development is they're trying to develop autonomy from their parents. They're trying to figure out the world, and they want independence from other people making decisions for them. But they're also still very young and can't be responsible for all of the decision making in their life. So it's really a time of developmental conflict at that age. I don't know if I would have, I think going through the tween and teen years myself as both a professional in the field that works with children of that age group, and then being a parent of a child in that age group, I've been doing this work for a very long time. I can't do it with my own children. So I think part of it is being able to rely on other people to help support your children through this, because if they're shutting down to you with regards to sharing this type of information, that's okay. That's developmentally what they want to be doing, but at the same time should still have an outlet of somebody that they can talk through these things with. And so it could be a coach, it could be a tutor, it could be a family friend, it could be an uncle, or somebody that can be an outside observer. And my daughter's a perfect example. She will not open up to me about school and the stresses and this, that, and the other thing, but she has a coach that she works with from our company that she will tell everything and anything to. And so, that's the way it's supposed to go. So they still need something, but they don't want it from their parents. So I would recommend just trying to find a mentor for your son that he's comfortable around, that doesn't think, that person is policing him for you, and gives him the outlet to talk about it where it doesn't make him feel like he's being babied because he's getting help from his parents.
And just like for those that aren't parents and maybe just thinking about how could they help someone with a lack of it, a couple of concrete things. Scales from 1 to 10 are great because you don't need 10 different terms. You can have 10 different levels. The other piece of scale is don't just have it a scale of stress. Have it a scale of stressed on one end and what on the other. That way you understand them as opposites. It could help, it could just help put things into context. And the other thing is go back to like basics of like creating some type of game. You could have like one of those magnet things, I feel, and with a bunch of different adjectives that define how you feel, and make that something that you put up like once a day. Like these types of ways to expose to vocabulary, don't have it just be them, do it yourself, because you could also pick words that maybe they don't know, and then they're like, well, what does that mean? And that can expand their vocabulary. But things like that it's not making someone feel like they're a lab rat, that's like, let me take a study on you to know, like no one wants to feel like they're under a microscope like that, but rather in some engaging way that it's encouraged to just describe how you're feeling and to build that vocabulary. Any tidbits from Claire on your end in terms of that kind of building that vocabulary in terms of like uncovering your purpose and stuff?
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. And I think, because we tend to work with students who are, 18 to 25, I think that, oftentimes what we see is that mind-body disconnection. So they're not able to identify the fact that, like, okay, my stomach is feeling butterflies or feeling jittery. And so I think a lot of times, we use mindfulness practices like yoga, meditation, to really help students slow down. Because if you can slow down, we're so used to kind of going a million miles a minute. And if we can actually slow down and actually create space, whether that's through one-on-one coaching, we also do group coaching where, you're having conversations and doing different meditation practices where you're actually doing body scans, for example, feeling your body and noticing like, what are the senses that I'm feeling in my body? I think that can be really powerful. So almost kind of incorporating different modalities. And I recognize for younger people that might not be accessible. But, I think for, especially the high school, college age, I think that incorporating yoga is a great way to just kind of start feeling your body and then being able to, like you said, Sam, have mentors, coaches, teachers who are having conversations about like, how are you feeling, or what do you notice in your body when X, and actually being able to just open that door, because it's not something we talk about, especially culturally. I'm from the South, and so we did not talk about our feelings. In fact, we were told not to talk about our feelings and just smile. And I think that, that's an experience that a lot of people, can relate to. And so a lot of our work is unlearning kind of the suffocation of not being able to feel, and to actually allowing ourselves to not only feel, but to express how we're feeling freely. And it's a lifelong practice for all of us because it's not something that's often encouraged. So I think that yoga and meditation can be great practices if that feels accessible.
I definitely mentioned this on a webinar before, but I remember my first anxiety attack and I didn't know what an anxiety attack felt like. And I like ran to the nurse. I was in like AP bio and stayed up all night studying and had a panic attack in school. Ran to the nurse and I thought I was dying. And she's like, this is an anxiety attack. I'm like, that's what it feels like. But sometimes it's as simple as that, like really someone helping you make that connection. Like this is what happens when, and so like one thing that I do tell a lot of people is this type of language is useful of when I do X, it leads to Y, and Y makes me feel Z. And so that way you're going from my actions lead to consequences, positive or negative, And those consequences lead to a feeling that I feel. And so somewhere in there, there's often a skip step. One of those connections isn't happening, but it is really useful. So I think we're going to wrap up. If anyone, while I'm reading this last quote, wants to throw in a last question, you can. But Nora from the audience probably thought I was ignoring her, but I was not. I was saving this quote till the end. So this was about, this was when we were talking about the parent wanting to go back, but I really think this comment is universal of, you can't go back and make a brand new beginning, but you can start now and make a brand new ending. And I think that's just such a good encapsulation of it, as both Sam and Claire have reiterated, it's never too late. You can always do this. It's always worth it. And it's a great, sometimes, and I think Sam highlighted this part, your purpose may shift. The things that give you value and meaning and may change in life. So this isn't like, and Claire kept saying this, it's not like it's just an aha moment, it happens and you uncovered it. It's a journey, it's an ongoing process. So I wanted to end on that because I thought that was a great little quote that was kind of encapsulating a lot of what we all said. So on that note, thank you so much, Claire. This was a lovely conversation, and I'm going to go reevaluate working on New Frontiers right now. I'm just kidding. Sam, thank you so much. I hope everyone, if you haven't eaten dinner yet, I hope you go enjoy your dinner. Anyone listening in, hope you enjoy your next meal, and have a great one. Thank you.
Thanks, Casey.
Thank you. Thanks,
Bye.
Casey. Bye.